There's one thing that I can guarantee you. You most definitely will lose subjects from time to time doing surveillance. There is no surefire way to guarantee you will never lose your target, but there are some things that you can do to give you the edge, to give you the advantage that will help make sure you maintain a visual on your subject during surveillance. Tip number 1, remember, no two surveillances are ever the same. Even if you're doing surveillance on a subject that you have worked before, there will be differences. Obviously, if you conduct surveillance on a subject more than once, you will start to see some patterns. You will gather new intel and have some new information for the next time. But even those things you can't guarantee will be the same. Treat each day, each round of surveillance as if it is a brand new case and a brand new day. Here's tip number 2. Know your intel, but don't rely solely on your intel. Intelligence is the information that you have prior to going out on your surveillance. Things like the subject's vehicle description, known habits of the subject. It is very important for you to know all that you can about your subject and their residence, the vehicles, and other things, but don't rely solely on that intel. When you arrive on scene, nothing may be as you thought it will be, and things may change rapidly as the case goes on. This video is sponsored by OREP Insurance and Working PI Magazine. OREP is a leading provider of private investigator liability insurance. Visit orep.org for a quote today. I had a case in a very rural town one time. The subject left the house and was followed about an hour where he went to a farm. And then he left driving a totally different vehicle and continued down the road the same direction that he was going prior. At first this seemed very suspicious. Am I burned? Did he see me following him? Later, I discovered it was his vehicle. The farm belonged to the family, and he traded off vehicles there as he needed them. This time, he grabbed his pickup and went and purchased some lumber at a store in a nearby city. Then he took it back to his house. It made perfectly good sense once I figured it all out. But if I had relied solely on waiting for that one car to leave, relying solely on the intel I had, I would have never known that he was inside that pickup when it left. Prior to him leaving in the pickup, a female had left in the car that he arrived in. I had to make a split-second decision, but thankfully I had a zoomed-in camera on the farm, and I knew there was still a guy there that I thought was him. Had I followed the car, I would have ended up following his wife back to the house, and I may have never known that he was not inside the vehicle. Tip number 3, make a plan, but be ready to throw that plan out the window. You need to go in with a plan on how you will work the case, but many times the circumstances that arise during the surveillance make that plan completely obsolete. Having a plan going in is good, but it is only as useful and only as good as the investigation tracks with the plan. Number 4, set up for success. You need to know the neighborhood prior to going out to the surveillance. Where are possible places for you to park? What is the most likely departure route? Things like that. I always try to set up some distance away, maybe 4 or 5 houses from the subject's residence on the most likely exit route. When I started doing surveillance, I was much more aggressive. I always parked where I could clearly see the residence, sometimes directly across the street. However, this can create many issues when conducting mobile surveillance. First problem, if you can plainly see the residence, the subject can plainly see you. Secondly, if you're too close, you are more likely to get made or be seen by the subject when he leaves. Number 5 is part of number 4, but it is vitally important as well. You need to know all avenues of departure. Get on the internet, look over the neighborhood very carefully. Where are the major arteries and what streets, alleys, roads lead to them? Where are the major shopping and business districts and how might the subject get to those? I usually either go out earlier than the scheduled start time or I go out the previous day if it's close by to observe neighborhood activity. What avenues do the neighbors take? Many times what your GPS tells you is the best route to the location is not the route that everyone that lives there will take. Remember, intel is good, but not to be relied on 100% of the time. The internet provides intel, not guarantees. Number 6, this is going to get some remarks from some of the veteran surveillance PIs out there, I know. I always sit in the front seat. I know everyone teaches you to sit in the back seat, and sometimes I still do if circumstances dictate it. But trying to hop up front, start your car, pull down any window coverings, and take off during a stakeout is a recipe to losing your subject almost every time. Or worse, a recipe to ensure you drive unsafe. Safety must always be your number 1 priority, folks. Tip number 7, don't let your brain get the best of you. It's hard sitting out there freezing your brain, boiling your brain, sometimes doing both both on the same day. You see everything. You see everybody. It's easy for the mind to start getting paranoid and think everyone is watching. Everyone knows where you're at. When you are following your subject, he may make U-turns or go into weird neighborhoods, but it's usually for a reason. Don't let your head get to you. Sometimes they're just lost, or they missed a turn, or they're on the phone. It's easy, though, to let your mind convince you that you are made or burned. Just relax, breathe, pull back slightly if need be, but not so much that you lose them. Think about the other reasons they may have done what they just did. Maybe they were going to get a cup of coffee, then realized that they didn't have time or didn't have money with them. They might have thought that they forgot something, and then they suddenly found it. I had a case where a guy left his house, pulled into the driveway for a McDonald's one morning, went towards the drive-thru, then suddenly went around the backside of the building. He went towards a ranch supply store in the rear. I thought, okay, he's just taking a shortcut there. He got to the end of the parking area in front of that ranch store. He flipped a quick U, drove right past me and the other investigator working with me. We were like, oh my goodness, we have been totally burned. We did get turned around. We somehow caught back up to him. Then he drove back country roads into the nearest city, drove clear across city, then went to a car wash, washed and cleaned out his pickup truck. Then he went to a parking lot by a Starbucks and waited inside his truck for almost 30 minutes. Then he went into a nearby restaurant with another man. Then he left and went all the way back home, 20 miles away. We then saw this other man arrive at his house with another truck. Turns out his truck was a company truck. The other guy was swapping trucks with him. Lo and behold, when I left for the day, I drove to that driveway by the farm supply store where he flipped that sudden U-turn and drove past us. At the end of that driveway was a car wash that was out of order. Once we knew all the facts, it all made sense. Had we let our minds get in the way, we would have lost him and never knew that he traded vehicles, which was new intel for the next day's surveillance. Tip number 8, stay close during the follow. When I started, I often tried to keep 1 or 2 vehicles between myself and the subject. I found, though, over time that this led to more lost follows. I have learned to stay close, not bumper to bumper, but close enough that I don't get caught at a red light if they go through a yellow light. Just drive normal. I also will let some distance between us grow in between stoplights if the lights are a good distance apart, but then close the gap as we get closer to the next light. This works well in most cases, but if they are speed demons gunning it after each green and you let too much space get between you and your subject, you will have to go even faster to catch up with them, and that could lead to a more dangerous situation. Tip number 9, hang on until you get to the first place they're going. It always seems like after you get to that first place they are going, everything else goes smoother after that. If they haven't made you by then, there's little chance that they will figure it out. Pay attention to the driving habits. Do they use turn signals? Do they signal suddenly or for long periods of time? Do they brake quickly? Do they drive erratic or fast? Are there notable things about the rear of their vehicle? Brake light shape, bumper or window stickers, tail light out, things like that. Anything to help you in future follows. You can gain a lot of intel on that first leg of the first tail. Number 10, ease up once they're headed home. If they went and got a ton of groceries, they probably are not going to be driving all over town with the groceries in the car. They will want to get home, so you can ease up a little bit on the follow. During this time, run through in your mind potential places that you can park when you get to the residence, where you can safely get video without the subject seeing you. Down the street a little bit, under a shady tree, someplace like that. When I started doing surveillance, I knew nothing. Literally, I knew nothing. I had seen some things on TV and read some things in books, but I really knew nothing about the real world of surveillance. Over many years, I've had a lot of opportunities to learn new ways to do things, and I always look at mistakes as new learning opportunities.